Welcome in, everyone, to another edition of the GSMC College Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. I'm your host, as always, Tommy Brzee. It is October 3rd around here. Going to be a great show for you today. We will continue on with our Week 6 picks, and we'll start with the main event of the weekend. Missouri at A&M, going to be a really fun game down there in College Station. We'll break it down for you in the first segment. Then we'll get to the rest of the SEC matchups of the week. We had Auburn at Georgia. Obviously, Ole Miss going to South Carolina is a little bit of a sketchy one. Then we'll get to Tennessee at Arkansas, and then we'll get into some ACC games of the week, and it doesn't include the one that you think it would include this time of year, but SMU at Louisville is a really big time game. I think Duke at Georgia Tech is a little bit of an under the radar game that you should be on the lookout for, and then Miami heading all the way out to Cal is definitely a sketchy one for the Hurricanes. Then we'll get to a week 6 whip around, just all of the different games that I haven't had a chance to get to yet. And then we'll do a little bit of a hot take Thursday, give you all of the takes that I have going into this weekend, and we might just continue that into tomorrow. Who knows? But let's get into the first segment here, and let's talk about Missouri A&M. And this is a very interesting game. I think when you talk about this one, it kind of goes by the wayside a little bit because it doesn't have Tennessee, Texas, Georgia, Bama, all the teams that are towards the top of the SEC. I think this could be the 5th team. I think whoever wins this one is absolutely in a position to be very much in the SEC conversation. And I think it would be really interesting to see that unfold. I just realized I forgot to do this. Before we jump in, fully at least, let's get to this real quick. We get tons of questions and comments throughout the show, and if you all want to get your question on the screen, we can have fun back and forth here. Use that super chat feature at the bottom of the Sports Network chat. Click on that $sign, add any question, comment you'd like, and we can have a fun back and forth here. But now, let's get into all the craziness that's going to go on in College Station this upcoming weekend, and I think it's going to be a really fun game. I think it's going to be a little bit back and forth. I think both these offenses, although they're not necessarily as potent as you'd like them to be right now, they're definitely very capable, and they can do a number of different things that are going to cause you problems. I think Missouri's in particular needs to take a step forward. I don't think there's any argument there, even from Missouri fans, that it needs to take a step forward the rest of the way throughout the season if they're going to make the effect that they very much want to make this year. So this would be the perfect game to get it started. Obviously, you have a number of games coming up. Main one is being Bama, but at the end of the day, this is a game where if you win this one, you probably set yourself off on a very good path. If you lose it, then you're in a weird spot going forward, and Missouri's walking a little bit of a tightrope to get into the playoff because, frankly, I think 10-2 would put them right on that chopping block with a couple of the other teams in the SEC. So it's going to be really interesting to watch this one get going. Obviously, A&M has a little bit of a quarterback situation. I do think it'll be Marcel Reed that trots out with the first team, but there's a world where Connor Wegman goes out there. I'd just be a little bit surprised with 3-0 record with Marcel Reed. I also think with that O-line playing the way that it is, probably want a little bit of a mobile quarterback back there. So definitely going to be really interesting. I think Missouri going to Kyle Field, it's going to be a battle. It's their very first road game of the season, and frankly, it's a really big test. It's the biggest test that they'll have on the field until they play Alabama in a couple of weeks in Tuscaloosa, and that's going to be a really fun battle. But at the end of the day, this might be the biggest game of the season for Missouri. I think this is a game where you looked at it in the beginning of the season and you said, it's a really manageable schedule. Maybe if they can win that A&M game, they're very much on their way to the CFP, and that's what they're hoping to do. And A&M, on the other side, obviously hoping to get their name back into the ring, would be undefeated in conference play, would have that one loss to Notre Dame, so they'd be very much in that conversation. So it'll be really fun to watch this one unfold. I think this team would be right up there, at least in the conversation for the SEC going forward. And there's a number of players to watch. I think Nate Noel is the guy that I want to talk about here for a second. This is a very smooth runner of the football. When he has the ball in his hands, he kind of glides around the field. He's really incredible to watch, and they're badly going to need him in this one. Had almost 200 yards in a couple weeks ago against Vanderbilt, but at the end of the day, when you talk about this A&M team, there are places you can attack them. You're not going to be able to do that if you can't run the ball. That's just the reality of playing A&M right now. It was the reality against Notre Dame. They couldn't really get anything going because that run game didn't really get going until, Jeremiah Love broke a couple of big plays. But at the end of the day, Nate Noel is a really fun player, one of those guys that could open up a lot of the things on the back end that they very much need to open up. And then Corey Flagg Jr. on the defensive side of the ball is someone I want to talk about because you talk about this A&M offense, especially under Marcel Reed. So much of it happens close to the line of scrimmage. There's so much, read option. There's so many short passes, things of that nature that someone like Corey Flagg is going to be playing a lot of hook zone, be playing a lot of spy, and just have to chase down Marcel Reed, just have to chase down Amari Daniels or Le'Veon Moss and keep this run game at bay. And then, frankly, you're probably in pretty good shape. So these linebackers, this front seven in general, really, if they can slow down this A&M rushing attack, then things get really interesting in a hurry for sure. And then I got Cyrus Allen, on the other side, a very, very talented player, a guy that was hurt for the first couple of weeks, but came back a couple of weeks ago and is a very dangerous player. I think you talk about this wide receiver room, it's not quite as deep as you would like if you're an A&M fan, but getting this guy back is absolutely huge for what they can do, and definitely gives them at least more options in that pass game, which obviously is a big benefit with a player like Marcel Reed that's not quite as polished as a passer. Giving him as many options as you possibly can is obviously going to be a huge benefit to you. So I think it's a hugely important player. I think he can make one big-time play in this game, and that could be the difference in this one, how close I think it's going to be. And then we got Bryce Anderson. I think this might be one of the best DBs in the entire SEC. He plays such a clean form of football, plays that nickelback position that we've talked about a number of times on here, and is not easy to play by any means. So he has a lot on his plate, and he's handling it very, very well. A very confident player, one of those guys that can help in the run, is very good in pass protection, in pass defense. A very dangerous player all over the field. He's one of those guys that if A&M's going to go a far way this year, he's going to have to make a number of headlines. He's going to have to be the guy that probably stands out on that defense, along with those edge rushers that are downright incredible. But on that back end, they're going to need a leader, and it sounds like Bryce Anderson is going to be that guy, especially against a team like this. You're going to need a good amount of organization against Missouri's wide receivers, and that's actually what I want to talk about. You got to get Luther Burden one-on-one. There are a number of places you can attack this A&M defense. The reality is the back end is probably the best place to do it. You just got to find openings. You got to find matchups that you like, and Luther Burden one-on-one with just about anyone in the country is going to be a matchup that Missouri likes. Now, how many times you're going to get that? It'll be interesting to find out. I think you can scheme that open a couple of different times, but at the end of the day, incredible player, one of those guys that if you don't get the ball in your hands, you're probably going to lose this game. In the last 2 games, he's had 12 catches, 193 yards, 3 touchdowns. So he's been kind of coming on the way that you would expect if you're a Missouri fan. But at the end of the day, this is something that they just have to do. They have to be able to find him on one-on-one coverage and then get the ball over top. And if he takes over this game, it's going to be impossible for the A&M offense to keep up. And then you got Marcel Reed. Marcel Reed played really good football. He's had 6 touchdown passes, 0 interceptions, but he's hovering right around 50% completion. Make him beat you with his arm. Make him be the guy that stands in the pocket and makes throws to Noah Thomas, makes throws to Cyrus Allen, makes throws to all these guys that, frankly, he is capable of doing that. He's not going to be able to do it for 4 quarters. He's going to give you a mistake at some point during that, and you'll be able to take advantage. And Missouri's been not great at taking away at getting picks this year, but definitely have players on that back end that can make those plays. There's no two ways about that. So it's going to be really interesting to watch this one unfold, and if they can keep Marcel Reed in that pocket, you probably have a pretty good winning formula, honestly, in this game. And then finally, hold that pass rush at bay. It is a very good group over there at A&M, and they are going to cause problems for you pretty much every which way from Tuesday. And your quarterback is one that has not hit the stride that you expected from him in this year, and you need to get that guy going. You can't get him going if he's on his back. So Nick Scourton, Shamar Stewart, Cassius Howell, they're going to be issues. You're going to have to handle them, and there's a number of people that can. There's no two ways about that. Marcus Bryant's been a great addition from SMU to fill out that offensive line. The right tackle, not quite as good. So you definitely have a couple areas that you're going to have to shore up, and Nick Scourton's coming off a game where he had 2 sacks and a forced fumble. Shamar Stewart's one of those guys that if he turns it on in 1 second, he is one of the most dangerous players in the country. He showed that against Notre Dame, and frankly, he could very well show that again. So Missouri has a path to victory. There's no two ways about that. They're absolutely a team that can get this done, but they need to do a couple of things that they just haven't really been able to do this year thus far. Then we got A&M, and I think the biggest thing about A&M, especially with Marcel Reed at quarterback, they have so many guys that can attack you on the ground. You have Le'Veon Moss, you have Amari Daniels, you have Marcel Reed that you're not going to be able to keep track. There's not enough linebackers, there's not enough DBs to go around, especially when you have a couple of players that can get deep like Cyrus Allen. So you're going to have to be very disciplined. And A&M, you're going to have to use as many rushers as you possibly can. You got 3 guys, those 3 I just talked about, over 200 yards. Le'Veon Moss has been rolling the last couple of weeks and has been absolutely incredible, has topped 100 yards twice this year. he is a very dangerous player. You got to give him room. And the way you give him room is just spreading this ball out, making sure this defense has to cover as many guys as possible, and then you let your real playmakers take over, which is Le'Veon Moss, which is Amari Daniels, which is Marcel Reed running the ball. So there's going to be a number of things going into this game, but I think A&M, when you talk about what they can bring to the table, the ways they can hurt defenses, it's just keeping those legs fresh and throwing multiple guys at a defensive front, at linebackers, and making it really tough for you to get any beat on the way that they're running the football. The other part of this is I think A&M has a really good defensive front. That's one of the things that, frankly, is probably the best part of their team, at least one of the best parts of their team. You got to trust that front. You got to be able to put this game in their hands and say, we know they're going to run the ball. We know Nate Noel, we know Marcus Carroll are going to be a problem for us. We're going to let you handle that. We fully trust you to handle what's going to come at us in the run game, and then we'll deal with the pass game. The reality is there's too many guys on that Missouri offense, especially at the wide receiver position, to not sit back just a little bit. You don't necessarily have to play prevent defense or anything crazy by any means, but you have to make sure those guys are in front of you, because Mookie Cooper gets deep one time, Luther Burden gets deep one time, Theo Weiss gets deep one time. This entire game changes, and frankly, that Missouri offense becomes really terrifying to deal with in a hurry. So you can't give them a pulse. You can't let them run the ball, and then, obviously, this kind of leads me into the next part of this. Make them one-dimensional. Missouri is an offense that has not gotten going to the degree that they want to, but at the end of the day, they're averaging over 200 yards on the ground and through the air. If you allow them to do that on Saturday, you're going to get buried. There's no two ways about that. I don't expect them to allow that, but the reality is, let's say they take that rushing total down to 70 yards, down to 80 yards. They're in a really good position, because as good as Brady Cook is, as good as these wide receivers are, he has been a little inaccurate at times. And if you take away that run game, if you heat him up in the pass rush, it's going to be nearly impossible for him to find his rhythm in this game. So it's going to be really interesting to watch this one unfold. I think A&M is going to have a lot of answers. So Missouri's going to have a lot of answers as well. They're going to have to if they're going to want to win this game. And frankly, I think it's going to be a really tough one to deal with for Missouri. I don't like them in this game. It's one of those back and forth games. I think it's going to come down to the wire, and I think A&M is going to be able to win it. I think this Missouri team is just not where they need to be right now, and they're walking into their first road game in Kyle Field. It's going to be a nightmare. It's going to be really hard for them to deal with that, and if they can and they come out with a win, then I am on here on Monday talking about them as a CFP contender, because they very well would be. I just think A&M is going to be too much. I think that defense is going to have enough answers for that offense, and frankly, I think Marcel Reed's going to be plenty to deal with for that defense. So it's going to be a really fun game down there in College Station. I do have A&M eking out a very, very close win, but it's going to go back and forth. I feel pretty good about that, and I think whoever walks out of it is looking at the CFP as a real possibility. No longer as this abstract thought that if a couple of things go our way, particularly on the A&M side, but if a couple of things go our way, maybe we can make something happen to. We're absolutely going to make something happen, because look at the schedule in front of us. So I do have A&M winning this one. I don't feel great about it. I think it could go either way in this one. Cannot wait for this game to unfold, and whoever wins it is off to the races, that's for sure. But let's take our first break here, and when we come back, we got a number of other SEC games to get to. Auburn, Georgia, Ole Miss, South Carolina, Tennessee, Arkansas. We'll get to all of them right after this, so stick with us.